So see, all speakers, thank you so much for joining today. Yeah, please.
Very warm welcome to all the speakers of this session of the Global Summit on AI. Thank you all for participating in this event today, evening, morning, depending upon where you are. I am Jyoti Arora, Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, MeitY. I am the host for the session. I want to extend a very warm welcome to all the youth, more than 80,000 and still counting, from various countries who have joined us for this session. I promise you it is going to be a very reverberating session. We are standing at the cusp of history of technology, where after having achieved tremendous success in power of computing, we have the great opportunity before us to utilize it for the wider benefit of humanity. It is in this context that holding of this global summit, RAISE 2020, becomes topical, where MeitY, that is the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, along with Niti Aayog, is exploring the potential of artificial intelligence for social empowerment. Our session is devoted to shaping young minds with AI. AI-based technologies empower young people, enhance their learning and creative expressions, while also addressing key challenges and concerns towards building our integrated future. In this context, it's more important that the new young generation, which is going to be tasked with the process of nation building, comes from an ecosystem where access to modern learning is more equitable, fair, affordable, personalized, and value-based. The use of AI provides a huge opportunity to achieve this at scale, and therefore, in this session, some of the finest global thought leaders who are delving in this domain will be sharing their perspectives on how to bring more equitable world order through the right use of this technology. Friends, we have divided this session into 3 parts. There are 4 speakers in the first part of the session, followed by a panel discussion and closing with 2 very interesting demos. The 4 speakers for the first part of the session are Mr. David Kenny, Dr. Vishal Sikka, Mr. Roger Schank, Mr. Anthony Salcito, followed by Mr. Dilip, Ms. Mala Sharma, Ms. Aditi Avasthi, Mr. Larry Nelson, and Ms. Susie Tinker. So you have a very interesting session ahead of you. The first speaker, let me introduce Mr. David Kenny. Mr. David Kenny is the CEO and Chief Diversity Officer of Nielsen Holding. Prior to joining Nielsen, he was the Senior Vice President of IBM's Watson and Cloud Platform. Kenny has spent his career in data science and artificial intelligence focused on healthcare, retail, marketing, and media industries. He has also served as president of Akamai, a cloud-based platform technology company. He was managing partner of FICCI, a media company, and was also co-founder of a company called Digitas, a Harvard alumnus. He also serves on the board of directors of Best Buy and Teach for America. Over to you, Kenny.
Thank you. Namaste. Bonjour. Guten Tag. Konnichiwa. Hola. Hello. Good evening and good morning. I appreciate all of you coming for this really important session today. Personally, education is very important to me. As was mentioned, I've been a long-term board member of Teach for America and a big supporter of Teach for All, the global effort, which includes Teach for India. So my personal efforts and philanthropy is in this topic. And in my professional jobs, when I was running Watson, of course, we focused on Watson education. I was pleased that my colleague from IBM, Arvind Krishna, spoke earlier in a different session. And now I am at Nielsen, which is really focused on the global audience and understanding where people spend their entire day. And I think it's so important when we look at education and the mission of both retention and outcomes, that we look at that mission with some context of what's happening broadly in media. Because what people are doing with their whole day should also influence the way they get skills and the way they get educated. So I do want to kick this off with 4 lessons we're seeing from around the world on the intersection of AI and media. First of all, I think the mission has to start with access. What we see is that all of these tools require basic digital access. Digital adoption is quite good around the world, particularly among youth in India, which is very promising. However, when we look at media habits, we do see that there are challenges with females. There are challenges with rural audiences where, quite honestly, digital adoption and access is not the same as it is elsewhere. And it's so important that we particularly focus on engaging our young girls and making sure they have access to digital tools to be able to do this, and that we really work with the infrastructure to make sure everyone, both those in urban centers and those in rural operations, have access. While there are very, very few bright spots about the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the things we've seen as people left cities and returned home to rural, companies like ours had to support and invest in more infrastructure to create digital access in order to get work done. And I believe we should leverage this access post-pandemic to make sure that we leave the systems in place and working well for education. Secondly, what I would say is that young people today are spending a lot of time on digital media. In India, youth are spending an average of 3.5 hours a day on their smartphones. That's pretty consistent with what we see in the rest of the world for those who have access. So they're being engaged by the media on that device and also on their computers and certainly their televisions. So we need to understand how people are being engaged by the media and be able to use that also for education. I believe this can create a fundamental transformation in education and skilling if we start to think about educational media and skilling-based media. So first of all, as I said before, we need to have access. We need to make sure that there's connectivity and a device. But I think we also need to look at engagement. What is causing entertainment? What is causing people to stay on, to make the next click? The tools that have been used in so-called growth hacking can be used in education as well. The way to give rewards, the way to use the community to encourage people to come back in are working well in media, and they can work well in educational media. It also needs to be entertaining. People have a lot of places they're spending their time on their phones and their other devices, making sure we produce content that's not only educational, but also entertaining, I think is going to be key for retention. To me, I certainly want to volunteer our company to engage and bring our data. We have a very deep understanding of what audiences are doing on media. And I think these insights of how people are spending their time can help with the so-called programming of educational content to make it work. And we also, I think, need to call on the media industry to include educational content in their programming, whether that be broadcast or streaming. And all platforms, I think, can contribute to this general mission of education and skilling. I think it will also be important following this session and others that we agree on some metrics that we use worldwide in order to track our progress. I'm a big believer in measurement. If you measure it, it will happen. So we need to do that quite effectively. What I would say is in our own business, AI is already helping in some fundamental ways to understand the audience. Our deep learning models are used to understand what content people are watching and to propose what they're going to watch next. Our deep learning models are also used to connect our data to other people's data so that you can build an ecosystem. And I think this data can be shared with the education sector as well. And our AI is used to connect back to identity graphs. The way we know what our audience is doing all day long is that regardless of which platform we're on, we come back to identity. In India, I'm so impressed with what you've done with the national ID system. I think having the media ID systems connect to that and the education systems connect to that can help make sure that we truly track everyone is being educated. As this is a global conference, I think the same thing needs to be approached around the world. Whatever identity platforms are working need to be able to be open and connected to the way we measure education and the way we entertain and inspire people with education. Lastly, I would say this is going to take a village. I'm so excited about all the panelists that are in this session today. I think it's going to be important that we have a technical backbone for this that is open so that everybody is sharing with each other, that it's simple to use, and that it's accountable. And lastly, and I think this is quite important, that it is inclusive. My dreams for education, as in media, are that they serve everyone, male and female, regardless of where they're coming from, regardless of their social status. And I think this openness of an inclusive media platform can connect to the openness of an inclusive education platform. And the more we make it easy for people to share data, to connect back to an identity platform, the easier it's going to be to measure our success and again, make sure that we are simple, inclusive, and accountable. I'm excited and humbled to be included in such a great panel today. I do think media has a role to play in education and skilling, and I certainly think we have some things to share. But I'm so excited about the other work and want to make sure we do this together so that we have basic access to begin with, and then the data to train AI models to really make sure that we engage people, inspire them, that will retain them, and that will get to better outcomes. Thank you for having me.
Insightful. In fact, India has the second largest population using internet, and we are going to connect all our villages, all our households by internet in the next 1,000 days. So we understand how important it is for everyone to have internet access for inclusive education. So thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you.
Delighted.
So next speaker for the day is Mr. Vishal Sikka. Dr. Vishal Sikka holds a BS in computer science from Syracuse University and a PhD from Stanford. He is the founder and CEO of YNI, a startup in Silicon Valley that provides advanced technological software and services in artificial intelligence and machine learning to large companies around the world. He was former CTO of SAP AG and former CEO of Infosys. He is credited with accelerating SAP's development processes, transforming its innovation culture, and leading several successful product co-creation initiatives with clients. He is also the creator of concept of timeless software, which represents the renewal of products without disruption to customer environments. He sits on the board of directors of Oracle and BMW and is on the advisory council for the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. Dr. Sikka is especially known for his championship of technology as an amplifier of human potential and his passion for applying software in purposeful ways to address some of the biggest global challenges. He is
Jyoti ji, it is a real pleasure for me to be here. Thank you so much for organizing this wonderful conference, to raise the awareness of AI in India and in the world. And in particular, I'm very proud of this session as it pertains to the youth. You know, Neil Postman, who was a collaborator of Marshall McLuhan, once said that children are the messages that we send to the future, a future that we will not live to see. The children are the future. And so I'm especially thankful for an opportunity to participate. I want to make 3 points, just 3 thoughts. So I'll just get to that. My first point, as a background, especially for the youth, we hear a lot about AI. We hear it in the news every day. And indeed, as we look at the situation with AI today, it has become quite powerful. There are many, many powerful applications of technology, and the power of AI is growing every day. But there are still very fundamental limitations that are still to be resolved, that are still to be overcome. So that is my first point. AI is very powerful today and growing in power, but there are still many fundamental limitations. Through the course of this conference, this RAISE conference, we have seen many examples of ways in which AI technology has impacted our lives already. We see it in language translation and voice interaction, facial recognition technologies that we have all become accustomed to using. Every other day, we hear news about AI's applications in healthcare, improving abilities in assisting drivers. We are not quite at self-driving yet. We keep hearing about it, but clearly assisting drivers is something that is making significant progress. Game playing is something that Professor Reddy talked about it earlier. So there are significant advances that are happening in AI. But at the same time, there are also some very fundamental limitations. We hear about AI's issues with ethics, with bias, how bias in data gets reflected in the decisions that are made by AI systems. David talked about deep neural networks. These are simply reflections of data and patterns and emphases that we feed into our AI systems, and those get reflected in then the decisions that are made by these AI systems. We see many examples of damaging use of AI. We see huge limitations in explainability, in our ability to understand why an AI system works the way it does. Why did it make a certain decision that it did, and so forth. But I think beyond that surface, there are some really fundamental underlying issues here that suggest to me that we are still early in the times of AI. I see that Roger is here as one of the speakers in this session. Roger has spent better part of the last 5 decades working on some of these issues. Recently, there was an example of a car that was driving on a highway, and it crashed into a truck that was parked perpendicular to the highway. And the explanation that the people who designed the car gave was that it like slammed into the truck at full speed. And the explanation that was given was that to the car, it looked like a road sign. Mm-hmm. And when you think about this, the car obviously has no idea what a road sign is, or what a truck is, or what a truck that is parked perpendicular to the road could mean. These representations of the underlying world that we take for granted are simply not there in the underlying AI systems. There are a lot of these ways in which the underlying basic capabilities of cognition, of reasoning, are yet to come in the AI systems that we are working on. There has also been part of the success of AI has been led by a phenomenal growth in computing. If you look at the success of AlexNet, which was a famous neural network in 2012, 8 years ago, from AlexNet until the AlphaGo Zero program that learned to play chess and Go and so forth, there was a 300,000 times increase in computing power. 300,000 times in the course of 7 years. That is doubling roughly every 3 months or something like this. There's an incredible increase in the amount of computing that is going into these systems, and corresponding increase in the power that is being consumed. And yet, if you look at our intelligence, with just about 2,000 calories, we are able to conduct ourselves. We are something like, Carver Mead once analyzed this, we are something like 100 million times more powerful compared to today's computers in our ability to consume power. So there is still a long way to go to get to many of the intelligence capabilities. So as the youth of today look to the news, my first point is, yes, there is significant power in these AI systems. That power is increasing. There are applications that are coming The Prime Minister talked about applications in healthcare, in agriculture, in education, in particular, those three industries that are going to completely rewire those industries, as in all other industries, in all walks of life. And this will have a significant impact on the jobs that we see today. A lot of the tasks that we can mechanize, that we can precisely articulate, they are already being displaced by autonomous systems, by automated systems. And yet there is still a huge headroom, a long way to go before we get to anywhere near the kinds of intelligence that we see all around us. My second point is that that situation that we are in, that the world is in today, is an opportunity of our lives, especially here in India. The state of AI today and the room that it has to grow and the state that the world is in presents us an amazing confluence of events that is a unique moment for us, especially in India. AI is still an immature field, very weak tools. Business adoption of AI is still in very, very early stages. I was reading yesterday a report by Gartner that 85% of AI projects in enterprises still fail. BCG and MIT together did a survey that 71% of AI projects in enterprises fail to meet their objectives. So we are still in very early days. There are very, very few AI jobs out there in the world. Some people estimate that to be around 500,000, that's it. And yet the need for AI talent is immense. This year in the US alone, there is a need for close to 3 million data scientists. This is a unique opportunity for India. There is an opportunity for us to participate in this next great revolution that is in front of us. A revolution that is where every walk of life can be reimagined by using the power of AI. That revolution is going to take people who understand AI techniques, people who have learned these techniques, a new generation of people who are not afraid of AI, who don't see that as a mystical thing that is for some elite chosen few, but it is something that is available to all of us, that is available for us to learn, to improve, to use, to build applications of, to teach others, and to build products that reimagine many different walks of life. India is uniquely suited because of our emphasis on software, our cultural emphasis on education, our literacy. Mr. Mukesh Ambani talked about the availability of data. All of these capabilities are absolutely critical for the time that is in front of us. So it behooves us to embrace these opportunities and also to disrupt the prior ways, even if those are ways in which we have been successful before. We need 1 billion AI literate people in India, whether we learn AI or use it to reimagine our world. It is the opportunity of our lives. My third point is how we get there is up to us. It is up to you. You are the I in AI. Our youth, our future, it is up to you. You can learn AI starting from any age, whether you are 5 or 95. You can learn AI. It is not something that is available to the chosen few, that is dropping from the sky and is a privilege of just some people, but it is indeed something that any of us can learn. One of my teachers said recently to me that the most important space when it comes to AI is the space between our ears. It is up to us to learn these techniques, to master them, to use them to our advantage. You know, everything that was ever invented, anything new that we see around us, was built by people, Steve Jobs once said, who are no superior to us. And I have thought about this a lot over the course of my life. How is it that inventions happen? They happen because someone sees something that is not there. Our eyes are programmed by nature to see what is there. And yet, we do have the ability. We can learn the ability. All of us can, to see what is not there. And invention is the act of seeing something that is not there, imagining what it would mean if it was there. What would it take to make that happen? What would it mean if it was there? What benefits would it bring? And then having the conviction to bring that to life. It is as simple as that. People say, oh no, well, Vishal, there are only a few entrepreneurs, there are a few inventors. It's nonsense. Have you ever seen a 4-year-old child who is not curious? We are all born with an inherent, amazing, innate curiosity, with a tremendous imagination, an ability to see and assimilate what we have never seen before. And it is that embrace of the future that is unknown that is going to serve us well in the time that is in front of us. John Mccarthy, the father of AI, was a great teacher of my life. And he used to say that problem finding is half the solution to solving a problem. And it was something mysterious to me when I first heard that as a student. The problem finding, there is such a thing as problem finding. And yes, indeed there is. With AI, we are building systems that are capable of solving problems that we can identify, that we can define, that we can articulate. But there is a great frontier in finding problems, in looking at the world out there and seeing what is missing. And the time ahead is going to need that. So those are my 3 points. AI technology is very powerful. It is growing in its power and impact, but it still has many, many fundamental limitations, a long way to go. AI is the opportunity of our lives. You know, there is a big difference between making a living and making a life, whether that life is an artificial one or a real one, our own. Earlier, I said that children are the messages that we send to the future. I mentioned Alan earlier, Alan Kay. He said that children are the future that we send to the future. So as I look to the youth in India, I am not afraid of the time of AI. I'm not afraid of the displacement that this can cause to any of us, to our jobs, to our futures. But indeed, I see this as a tremendous opportunity for all of us to participate in, to contribute, to shape the world that we are in, to come up with ideas, to come up with innovations, to deliver these innovations to the world ahead. The Prime Minister talked about the age of humanity when humanity started to think and build tools. And now we are at a time when our tools can start to learn. It reminds me of, in our history of our planet, of the Cambrian Explosion, back some 500 million years ago. Recently, scientists came to understand what caused the Cambrian Explosion. It was the largest explosion of life in the history of our planet. Many species came up at that time. And it turned out that the planet was just becoming inhabitable. Oxygen was becoming available on the surface beyond the water. Most of the planet was covered in water. And as species realized that they could learn to see in the sunlight, avoid being hunted, find food and learn and thrive, they developed the sense of sight. The ability to see was one of the primary abilities that was developed in the Cambrian explosion. That ability to see was, of course, the ability to see what was there. In the time of AI, the ability to see what is not there, imagine it, and use the AI at our disposal to help make those happen faster and better than we could ever before is the opportunity of our lifetimes. And I'm really looking forward to India not only participating in this revolution, but leading this revolution for the time in front of us. Thank you very much.
Vishal, thank you for that inspiring words. I think you have raised the issue of ethics. You have addressed the fears of youth about loss of jobs. And also there is a message of hope, how you can leapfrog the technology for an equitable world order. The demystification of learning of AI, I think the youth will be very inspired. 1 billion learners and users of AI in India. Thank you very much. Our next speaker for the day is Roger Schank. He is CEO of Socratic Arts, a PhD in linguistics from University of Texas. Roger is an American artificial intelligence theorist, cognitive psychologist, learning scientist, educational reformer, and an entrepreneur. This is what his CV says. We are very keen to know what this is all about. In 1981, he became chairman of computer science at Yale University. In 2001, he founded Socratic Arts, a company that sells e-learning software to both businesses and schools. Schank believes that educational system is fundamentally broken and that software will need to replace conventional teaching methods. Very unconventional. Over to you, Roger. क्या हुआ भाई इसकी स्क्रीन को उधर क्या
Roger, you need to unmute your phone. Yeah.
Did that work?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, fine. Well, these are my two favorite subjects, and you're not going to like anything I have to say about any of them. Artificial intelligence has been in my field, and I've been working in it since before most of you were born. Maybe not the guys with the gray hair, but and I went into it because I thought I had a computer that I'd like to talk to, and I was trying to get it to understand me, and it didn't. So I started to work on how to get computers to understand. I was working on how to get them to learn, because you can't get them to understand unless they learn something from their experience. And I had this horrible experience. My children were going to school at the same time. And I watched my children learn in school and realized it had nothing to do with what I had learned about learning. So who was wrong? The school. The school's idea of learning is, I'll tell you something, you'll memorize it, and then later there'll be a test. Brilliant. Could we figure that out better? And the promulgators of learning by that method by schools are governments and religious organizations, all of whom know the truth and want to tell it to you. Now, as it happens, we don't have very many quotable presidents, but we had one in 1795, or whenever he was president, John Adams, who was thinking about the education system in the United States. And he said, schools should do one of two things, either of these two things. It should teach you how to earn a living, and it should teach you how to live. Right, we don't do that. What we do in the education system across the world is copy what the Romans thought what good education was. They wanted you to learn literature, and they wanted you to learn mathematics, and they wanted you to learn philosophy, and they had 100 things they wanted you to learn. Why? Because they were trying to teach people to be orators in the forum. Now, it turns out there aren't a lot of orators in the forum jobs anymore, and they weren't interested in teaching Joe Average to do anything. And right now we have a school system which is based on some ancient ideas about education. And if we want to have countries be successful and improve, what we need to do is figure out what the technology allows us to do and do it. And it's not AI that's the technology. The technology is really not that complicated. Somebody recently said, a moment ago, Vishal said, we need more data scientists. Hey, I have a course in data science. It takes 6 months, full time, all day, every day, and you dive in and you're finished, you're a data scientist. Universities won't run that. Why? Because everyone knows courses have to take 1 hour a day, and you have to take 5 of them at the same time, and they have to be people lecturing at you. Well, I don't think people learn by listening. Plato, who knew something about education, said you learn by doing. Our data science course is a course where all you do is attack hard data problems, and there's a person on the other end who you can ask questions if you're confused. It's my very complicated philosophy of education. I'll throw you in the lake and see if you can swim. If you can't, I'll dive and pull you out and we'll try again. This is what learning is. But school is full of nonsense. And what I was very sorry to read yesterday, I was looking up India and education. And it turns out there's this awful test. called the PISA test, which is administered by OECD around the world. And there's an international competition for who wins. I was once called down to Bogota, Colombia. We have an emergency. What's your emergency? We came in 65th in the PISA test. I said, it's not the World Cup. Oh, they were hysterical. And I looked up India, and India, it turns out, did very badly, so they canceled it, and now they've brought it back because I don't know why. But I have to tell you that as long as you're studying to pass tests, you are wasting your time and everyone else's time. What there is to do in education is understand and identify who you're dealing with, as my example. My son hated school, my daughter hated school. My daughter liked to write, so I just saw her write all day long. As an adult, she's written 5 books. But my son is a more interesting story. I couldn't stand what the US school system was doing to my kids, because the most important thing my kids were learning, as I was at Yale in these days, and that's in Connecticut, and it's full of fancy suburbs. The most important things my kids were learning how to do was to talk about what car their father drove, or talk about what kind of clothing they had, or talk about nothing that didn't do anything important, but have all the wrong values. So I packed up the family and we moved to Paris. I said, let's learn about the rest of the world maybe by going to school in Paris. My daughter came back with a B in English. A B in English. I said, gee, does anyone in your class speak English besides you? She said, no. I said, then why did you get a B? Did other kids get A's? Yes, they did. She says, because I don't know what the subjunctive case is. I said, does anyone in your class speak English? No, just me. But she couldn't get an A in English because the school system is so stupid. But the real reason I went to Paris is that my son, since we lived in New Haven, which isn't far from New York, and my parents lived in New York, we'd go down and visit. And my son discovered the New York subway system and couldn't get off it. All he wanted to do is ride the subway. When he was 8 years old, he begged me, could you please ride by myself? I said, okay, I'll sit in the back, in the next car, he doesn't know I was there, and watch out for you. He loved subway so much that we moved to Paris mostly so he could ride the metro. He was 10 years old. I walked him down the very first day. I got to the metro. I said, here's how you buy a ticket. Here's how you read the map. Bye-bye. He looked at me. He said, why have you been keeping this from me? I took my kids on trips when I traveled. I took him to Tokyo at one point. He never got above ground. He never saw any of Tokyo, but boy, did he learn the subway system. So he decided to go to college at Columbia University. Why? They have a subway. And he called me up and he said, I decided to major in history. And by this time I was at Northwestern. I said, then get on a plane and come home. What do you mean? What should I major in? I said, subways. He said, how do you do it? I said, I don't know. Why don't you find out? Make a long story short, he has a PhD in transportation. He is the chief innovation officer of the Los Angeles transportation system. On a daily basis, he is the happiest kid in the planet. I mean, he's not a kid anymore, because all he wants to do is invent new subway systems. He doesn't care where. He'll take a job in any city to go and invent subway system. He loves it. So I have a very simple point of view about education. There's not much to it. Find out what kind of kid you got and let him be himself. When I was on a cruise last year, as it happened, it stopped in India about 5 or 6 times. And I kept talking to all the people on the cruise, the kind of people who go on cruise, old retired people. And I asked every one of the people I met, what did you like to do when you were a kid? One after another said they liked to solve puzzles. So I asked them what they did. Every one of those people was a doctor. Geez, that's surprising. So why can't we have a puzzle solving curriculum that starts when you're 5 and you don't have to do it, only if you want to. But if you want to, you can do puzzles till the cows come home and become a doctor by the time you're 18. Or not, or some other kind of puzzle, or just some other kind of thing. I don't care. I asked, because I work on cybersecurity courses for the Defense Department. And I asked all the cybersecurity people I met, what did you like to do as a kid? And they said, break into things, break the locks. I want to steal things. That's who our cybersecurity hackers are. Okay, so I've been recruiting people like that. You like breaking into things? You like stealing things? Go to our hacker course. Again, our hacker course takes a full year, or we have a short one of 6 months. All you'll do is dive in and learn, and you come out learning to be a hacker. The problem we have here is everyone is obsessed with credentials. So there's, of course, a hacker test, and it has nothing to do with being a hacker that people have to pass in order for people to believe you. And so the problem we have in education is very simple. It's dominated by tests. We teach to the test. There is a love of multiple choice tests and memorization of random garbage. So, and that every school system in the world does this again and again. And when the school system that wins this PISA test, which is almost always Singapore, because they're willing in Singapore to study everything and memorize everything, but that doesn't make an innovative culture. You don't see the Singaporeans innovating things. The issue is to take people who are basically innovative and let them innovate. You like to invent something? Okay, start inventing. You can go in the invention curriculum. You want to build something? Play with blocks? Go in the builder curriculum. When I started to think about this, I actually thought about myself. I can remember being in kindergarten and the teacher said, okay, boys, play by yourself. And she left the room. And I said, okay, we're going to build a city with blocks. I said, you build the bridges, you build the roads. That's what I still do. I organize my people to do stuff and I give them advice on what to do and they do it on their own and I correct it or argue about it. The issue of who a person is and teaching to that person is the number one issue in education, not getting good grades, not passing international tests. And I'm sorry to tell you, AI is not going to help. Now, I know there are a lot of people who think AI is going to help. Why? Because we'll help you memorize the answers better for the test, or we'll adjust the content because we see this is hard, so we'll give you something else. That's the same crappy system. That's not what AI is for. What AI can be for, and something I've been building for years, revolves around a story I want to tell you. I was having lunch with a colleague of mine, my most important colleague. I'm sure you've never heard of him, Bob Abelson. He's long dead. And I said to him, why can't my wife cook steak the way I like it? I like it rare, undercooked. She can't do it. And he said, I tried to get my hair cut in England 20 years ago, very short, and they wouldn't do it. At first, that sounds like a deranged remark. That is how people talk. Say something to people, and they remind them of something else they want to say back. When you give me a computer that does that, I'll be impressed by what it does. It's very difficult. But he wasn't difficult for him, so he did that. And he was reminded of the haircut. Why was he reminded of this haircut? Because that's how we learn. We take one piece of information and match it to other things we know and try to understand what the relationship is. What he was saying was, and this is all there is to know about learning, we expect something to happen, it doesn't happen, we need an explanation about why. We can ask somebody or we can come up with ourselves. He was wondering, had been wondering for 20 years, why the person wouldn't cut his hair short. And then he came to the conclusion based on what I said about my wife, which is she didn't want to make my steak rare because she didn't think that was the right way to do it. When she couldn't do it, she said, I shouldn't eat it like that. And that's exactly what the barber was saying. You shouldn't look like that because crew cuts didn't exist in England. They existed only in the States. And so we learned something, which is you can't get somebody to do something if they think it's the wrong thing to do. This is the issue. We like to make baloney about AI. You were talking about self-driving cars. I have a picture. I'm going to put it up. When I was at the Stanford AI lab, which is not a billion years ago, there was a sign that said, caution, robot vehicle. This is 1968. Yeah, but they didn't have a robot vehicle. We're lying then, we're lying now, okay? Robot vehicles is very cute. I wouldn't get me in one because the subtleties about making these decisions revolve around past experiences and modifying past experience to present experiences. So if you see a truck parked funny in the middle of the road, you first thing to do is, did I ever see that before? What's going on there? Well, your computer isn't thinking that. And so this idea about AI is doing something, it's not. AI is counting, it's very good at counting. And the premier purveyor of this nonsense was IBM. IBM was very busy telling you how Watson could outthink God knows what. And they interviewed Bob Dylan. I don't know if people know Bob Dylan in India, but us old American guys know it. And they interviewed Bob Dylan and they said, had Bob Dylan on the commercial, and he said, there is this, Watson said to him, I see that your songs are about how love fades. In other words, it counted a lot of words and found love and fades. However, those of us who know Bob Dylan know he was an anti-war singer. He was protesting the Vietnam War and other things. He never said those words. So if we understand by counting words, we don't understand much. You actually have to understand what people are trying to accomplish, what they're trying to do, who they are, and that's what intelligence is about. And you mentioned John Mccarthy. Now, John McCarthy was one of three people who were senior to me in AI back in the 60s. The other two were Newell and Simon. Newell and Simon wanted to know how the mind worked. They were trying to figure out how humans problem solve, which is the title of one of Newell's books. John McCarthy didn't want to know anything except how logic was in the mind. That's what he cared about. Predicate, he thought the mind was born with predicate calculus in it. And although I was at the same lab with John McCarthy for years, I never understood a word he was saying. Newell and Simon, on the other hand, I understood because they were worrying about what I was worrying about. How does the mind work? which is the same question for AI as it is for education. Thank you.
Well, Roger, that was very provocative.
Good.
What you are saying probably is that the edifice on which AI learning can be built is curiosity, creativity, and the ability and will to learn how to live, and not how good you are in your class standards through the OECD metrics.
Excellent.
So therefore, we have to kind of design a new metrics to be able to learn, and so that AI can go to the masses, and then that matrix has to be different from the one which is existing today. And I think with your lecture, all those people can take a lot of happiness and go back home saying, those who are sitting on not the front bencher but the last benchers, so they can always have that hope that they can probably they have learned to live life, and therefore if they go this path of learning the AI, probably they will be better candidates. I think this is the way we have to kind of redesign our learning of the AI. I think that is a very good message which you have given. Thank you so much. You have provoked our youth. Let them learn and react on what you are saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the last speaker on our first session is Anthony Salcito. Anthony Salcito leads worldwide education and public sector for Microsoft within Microsoft's worldwide commercial business. Prior to taking this role, Salcito was general manager of education in the United States, supporting schools and universities across the country. Salcito joined Microsoft in 1992, spending his early years at the company architecting his high-profile product launches for Windows NT and Windows 95. He brings a lot of experience of dealing with young generation. Let's hear his thought. Over to you, Anthony.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you, and certainly following Dr. Shank's remarks on education, I do think that there's a huge time we have to reflect on the changes that are needed. And it really starts with empowering students to follow their passions and unleash their talents. That's our mission at Microsoft, to help every person on the planet achieve more. And we need to do that not only through technology, but really uplifting human expectations. And I'll talk a lot about that as we go forward. I am going to use some visuals. I think it's probably better than looking at my face to share some visuals of what's going on. To help me tell the story. And one of the things that I think we've got to put in context is the shift that's taking place with regards to COVID. And as schools have moved learning to the home and embraced remote and hybrid learning, we've got to recognize, one, that this is a movement that will go forward in the future of education and really create a new normal, that the goal is not to get back to school. In fact, we'll question what being in school really means. Going forward, learning is going to be in the hands of individuals, not institutions. And students who have passions to pursue will be using technology and tools and resources, as well as personal interaction and connection, to fuel their future. And then institutions will play a vital role to support that journey in various stages throughout their lives when needed, but not be the central hub of guiding student assessment and learning journey. Now, we've got to shift and reimagine what this looks like and leverage the opportunity that we've been afforded with a tremendous tragedy that we're responding to, but a shift in mentality. Now, one of the things that I've been working on with educators around the world, including India, is the great fear technology's emergence and tools like AI have on reducing human capacity. Many educators have felt the rise of technology and the rise of AI would diminish their value. What we've seen in a very quick time with COVID response is that when the world moved to digital learning, the role of an educator was not only not diminished, it was actually quite enhanced, because this is a human journey that we've got to go on. And educators play a vital role in inspiring and coaching students going forward. We've got to shift our mindset on not only using tools, but understanding what's most important and how we evolve this new way of thinking in how we build not only the education system for the future, but how students prepare to question everything that you're learning and how do you apply it to making things happen in the world. That's what we've got to do. Now, one of the things that I think we need to spend some time on in this new context is understanding what the purpose of what we're trying to do in school and with technology is all about. It's about building skills that will carry you through life, that will inform how you apply your interests and passions and talents to making positive change in your community, in your country, in the world. We've often recognized the value of the sort of core C's, communication, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. I'd like to recognize the needed addition of things to inform character and approach citizenship. In our new world, and certainly a world fueled with AI, an understanding of how to ethically use technology, but also bring caring and curation to digital content and digital materials. Understanding the importance of culture is super critical. But all of this is founded on a foundation where I would imagine as an employer and as someone who's interviewed certainly thousands of people in my career, I want these R's to be demonstrated by students. So students that are listening understand the value of building your skills. And in every course that you're taking, in every subject you have,
I think the first panelist I'd like to actually invite is Ms. Mala Sharma, who is from Adobe. She is based out of New York. And in fact, it's very interesting because a lot of the words that we use today, everybody used the variant of creativity. So Mala is the Vice President of Creative Cloud Product Marketing and Community at Adobe. She leads the Creative Cloud, the GTM and business strategy from inception. She's championed the business transformation from selling boxed creative suite software with perpetual licensing. Today, Sharma's team manages the overall Creative Cloud product experience and creates data-driven customer experiences that directly impact how users discover, learn, and try and buy Adobe's creative tools. In fact, these words were used by almost every panelist, every keynote speaker earlier. Prior to this, she was at Creative Labs for 9 years, where she was last director of product marketing for the Americas. She's a passionate advocate for the creative community. So over to you, Mala, for your sharing of the creativity experience at Adobe.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Namaste, everyone. It is an absolute honor to be here today. Being from India at this really significant event, I'm calling in from San Francisco. And this is an important opportunity because I'm incredibly passionate, not just about education and this topic, but creativity in education. The reason creativity is important, and Mr. Schank spoke about this, he talked about doing, is I believe that creativity is the one skill that builds self-worth like nothing else can. Like David, who spoke earlier this evening, I got an opportunity about 1.5 years ago to volunteer with Teach for India. And I was teaching creativity and technology for the first time to 7th graders. They were in the age of 13 to 14. They had never interacted with technology. They had never used any of Adobe's products. And I introduced them to a product called Adobe Spark. And what it did to them in minutes of interacting with the software, where they were able to create videos and tell stories, was absolutely mind-blowing and inspiring for me personally. Their little bodies swelled with pride, and they were so excited with what they were able to create. And it just reinforced my conviction that creativity builds self-worth like nothing else can. But before I jump in, just really quickly, for those not familiar with Adobe, Adobe's mission is to change the world through digital experiences. And we've been doing this for years, since inception over the last 30 years. And we have 3 areas of focus where AI plays a really important role. The The first is about unleashing creativity, and that's the business that I'm in. It's called the Creative Cloud business. The second is leveraging AI for document productivity. We recently enabled within PDFs in Reader the ability for individuals to adjust how they read and how the letters show up, so it makes it easy for them to read intelligently, and powering digital businesses. We have a platform called Adobe Sensei, and this is our artificial intelligence platform. And the purpose of artificial intelligence in the context of creativity is about democratizing creativity. We believe that Sensei helps all of us be smarter creators and spend less time on mundane tasks and create beautiful experiences and have impact in the world. We've had many features released over the years, like hundreds of features. If you're familiar with Photoshop or Premiere Pro, InDesign, Illustrator, they're all full of features that make storytelling easier and making creativity more accessible. And why this is important is we talked a lot about artificial intelligence. Somebody asked a question about math. And the last time I looked at how math was done, it's pretty much zeros and ones. And in a more provocative way, I believe that machines can tackle math, but what machines cannot tackle is creativity. That's where the individual impact comes in. And that is why how we think about artificial intelligence is really important in the realm of creativity. For example, we have a product called Adobe Stock, which is basically stock photography service from Adobe. And if you do a search, and you could try it out live right now, CEO, it doesn't just show you the biases that are built into the human mind, which they might imagine, a white male Caucasian CEO. We factor in today that the context for the person searching, it might be different. To your point, Mr. Schank, about the context that your son had when he went and spent time in the subway, allowed him to think about what the future of subways might look like in today's context. So we apply but representing society as we know it today. And therefore, socially responsible AI is a really important part of how we think about creativity and AI. So now shifting to learning, there are some really important aspects of learning. And Mr. Nelson touched on this earlier, where community is a really important part. So there's a part that Adobe or Microsoft or other companies can play in providing tutorials and content, but a really important piece of what Adobe tries to enable is community-based learning. We connect millions of creators across the world where they can share their best practices, what learnings they have created with others, so that the community can build on each other's capabilities and learn from each other. We also create content that's specific from Adobe about how to learn creativity. And finally, we've recently introduced a host of content for teachers in this current world of COVID context where everybody is learning from a distance. And this is really important because we are trying to bring creativity into every aspect of learning, whether you're learning English, you're learning history, you're learning math. How can you use creative storytelling to be able to do as a way of learning as opposed to just rote learning? And that is a massive emphasis that Adobe has placed. And what's great is I've been talking to many educators globally since COVID started and even prior. And what's really interesting to me is how teachers and faculty globally are thinking about how to engage students through creativity. And I'll share a few quick examples. There's a teacher here in Napa in California. She uses a product called Character Animator, where she, instead of teaching, just one to many, she creates a character that moves based on her facial expressions to engage her students. There are many universities thinking about how to assess learning You talked about taking tests and passing on standardized tests. Well, proctoring is not the best way of determining whether a student has learned or not. We assert that creating is a way to really determine if a student has learned. And the process of creating and the process of building a portfolio is something many universities globally are thinking about. A conversation I had with Arizona State University, again, in this distance learning environment, they're looking at how they can use augmented reality as a way for students to use and maybe perform a surgical procedure to drive learning. So in closing, what I'll really quickly touch on is a lot of what I've talked about is how we can enable creators to tell stories. But a really important piece about this is the flip side, is the growing proliferation of altered content is something that is important for creators and consumers to be aware of. So Adobe recently introduced a digital content authenticity initiative in partnership with Twitter, as well as other partners like New York Times, to allow users to share what alterations have been made to help remove any misinformation that might be floating in society. We'll be sharing more about this at an event that's coming up in 2 weeks in India called MAX, which is the world's greatest creativity conference. And thank you once again for this opportunity. The main message I want to give is, in a world of AI can help and democratize creativity, which is a really important skill set for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mala, for that, for just not only telling us about what Adobe is doing, but more importantly, how we could unleash creativity in the thousands of young people who are actually following us and following this program. And also, very interestingly, your last comment about, how to look at, just to use a very commonly used word, fake creativity, and, as you address that. If I would now actually like to turn to Larry Nelson, and he of course is the education lead at Microsoft Asia, and he leads the education business unit for primary, secondary, and higher education institutions. And I'm sure he might have a view on the PISA test. And but anyway, besides that, he also drives digital transformation projects in education organizations across Asia. Before joining Microsoft, he led the strategic planning of telecom services at Stanford University. He was also a principal at the Global Education Technology Knowledge LLC, where he provided strategic planning, marketing, operations, market research, and business development expertise to corporations. He was also the vice president of sales and marketing and finance at SchoolCity.com and the CEO of the Decision Development Corporation, a privately held education software publisher. Before entering the technology industry, he grounded his business skills at General Foods, Procter & Gamble, and Bloomingdale's. So, a huge experience in industry, then in the education sector, not-for-profit sector, and now with Microsoft. So, Larry, Anthony's keynote really shared a number of examples how AI or stroke machine learning can be used to support student learning outcomes. Could you expand on that conversation and share some of the examples of how you see AI landing in a large young generation? India has the largest young population in the world. And what scenarios of uses of AI in education are you particularly excited about in developing countries, including India?
Well, thank you very much, Dilip. I appreciate the introduction. Obviously, you went to my LinkedIn account, but I really do appreciate that. And certainly also want to thank Ms. Arora for hosting this session and for everyone who's organized this event, RAISE, Responsible AI for Social Empowerment. I have to say, as I think about your question, Dilip, and also just reflecting on the opening ceremony a couple nights ago, I was frankly quite moved by Professor Reddy's comments, where he talked about the opportunity for AI, really representing the potential for positive impact and having a palpable impact on people's lives. And of course, the great opportunities it could add to business, but I was really struck by his words where he talked about, how AI stood the potential of providing cheers and smiles to people and having a positive impact, and that, if India will be empowered, and knowing that the people will be happy too. And as I also thought a little bit more about what Prime Minister Modi's comments were, I was struck by quite a few things that he shared and talked about. Not only, of course, the potential for AI to have a wonderful impact on the planet, continue to fuel India's place and being a leader in knowledge and learning throughout history and even today. But I was very excited and encouraged about the National Edu-Policy 2020 that is landing, and India's focus on tech and learning and skilling as a major part of education. And really what I kind of want to think about a little bit before answering your question was his final comments reflecting on the roadmap for responsible AI, and to really think about the notion that to really truly transform a livelihood around the world, the need to be responsible. And I think that's important, and I think it kind of speaks to the elephant in the room that some people think about, and I think Dr. Schank reflected on a bit, and some of the other earlier speakers as well, about some concern about how or whether or not AI has a nefarious side to it as well. And for Microsoft, we certainly adhere to AI principles that I think are worth noting, and I'd like to share a little bit about. And those are kind of 6 core things to ensure that AI, where it is applied and where it is used, has a fairness principle where AI systems should really be treating people fairly. Likewise, reliability and safety should be a key piece where AI systems should perform reliably and safely. Certainly, systems should be secure and respect people's privacy, as well as an element of inclusiveness, making sure that AI systems empower everyone and engage people. Last 2 being transparency and accountability, making sure that AI systems should be understandable and that people should be accountable for the systems that we build. I think there's real importance in thinking about adhering to principles such as this to make sure that we retain and stay on a positive path and instill the confidence that people, I think, are looking for in how AI will have a positive impact and support people having happy and smiles on their faces, as Professor Reddy talked about. But yeah, no, I think Anthony talked certainly about quite a number of things that we're doing across Microsoft. I think there are many ways in which AI is going to impact education. As obviously benefiting Asian educators across the globe and around Asia and Asia Pacific as well, having an impact and helping teachers and students run more effectively or more efficiently, having better access to data and information about performance. AI is certainly helping to develop many different types of resources as well, and helping schools address some of the challenges that students may have from time to time. Really excited about one example. UNSW, University in New South Wales, Australia, has actually been using Teams as a platform to drive collaboration and support learning. They actually built an AI tool using machine learning, which is now available on GitHub as an open source resource, a tool set called QBot, which was basically looking at ways in which, or rather, it was basically watching and looking at the ways students were interacting and communicating with each other, and detecting from that gaps in their learning or gaps in where they needed more help, and flagged and started pinging TAs and professors where those gaps existed, so that answers could be brought to the students and help keep them on path and keep them on track as they were progressing. It ended up building an engine that actually started to create ways in which the system could actually answer questions directly to students too as they came about. So a great example of how AI could really help students. Across India, there's a ton of examples, some really cool things that we're doing. One of the ones certainly that I'm really excited about is a partnership, if you will, that we have with NASCOM, the National Association for Skilling in India, where we have launched a set of courseware materials that can be available and that students can take to actually develop skills using AI. And really, really exciting stuff. I'd urge people to go to the website to get it. There are courses around AI that can be taken, a whole series of speakers. There's an online assessment, and there's skills certificates that come out of that as well. So really, really neat and exciting partnership. Just one example of a number of things that we're doing across India to land and help students learn from AI and develop skills around it that could help their futures.
Thank you, Larry, for that insights, and I'll come back to you in the next round with some specifics on that. And it's really a pleasure to invite our third panelist, Aditi Avasthi. And first of all, Aditi, before you join in, congratulations that I believe that you just won the Edtech award yesterday and the Raise Edtech award. So it's really a pleasure to have you with us today. Aditi is the founder and CEO of Embibe. And she is an Indian entrepreneur who is the founder of this company. And also she's been recognized not only here, but she's also the Global Innovators list of the World Economic Forum, and has been awarded, even recognized by Accenture as the Innovator of the Year, awarded by Economic Times, a lot of awards at this young age. She loves building stuff that can create a huge dent in the universe. She started at TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, based in the UK, and there itself she won the Young Leaders project, although initially her nomination was rejected because she was too young. So that actually demonstrates the power of creativity and passion, and like Roger said earlier. After the MBA, she joined Barclays Bank. Barclays as Deputy Chief of Product and Strategy Head for their mobile banking division in Africa. Later moved to Delaware. She founded Embibe in 2012 with the traditional startup funding from family and friends, and she got more investments from Kalari Capital and Lighthouse Ventures. The platform, she actually runs a very interesting personalized engine for education based on knowledge graph that connects all grades, curriculum, and learning context together. Aditi, what you've been doing is actually, rethinking education and EdTech. And how do you actually seeing the technology and artificial intelligence, machine learning, driving, this whole education space going forward? So, you had a very interesting comment from Roger about education. I don't want to repeat that. And even, many of the other panelists and speakers also talked about, the current challenges with education. So how would you actually look at this, and what are you doing about it?
Awesome. So first of all, thank you for saying young person 2 times. I'm not as young anymore, so that was just great. It was worth the wait, let me say that, Dilipji. And it was wonderful listening to all of the other presenters before. Let me start with like the number, because I love doing that. So 260 million kids in K-12 education in India, 5 hours in school, which means 1.3 billion hours would have been spent just today in formal education. So while we can sit and pontificate about what the future looks like, this is what reality is today. And this is reality not just for India, but for the 1.3 billion, give and take a few students globally who are still enrolled in mainstream education, which is a dinosaurial industry. There you go. I just invented a word, Mala, for creativity. It's like I said, dinosaurial industry, which is not, transformed. There are stellar entrepreneurs around the world who prefer to take us to Mars rather than to tackle this behemoth of a problem. So I think that, first of all, to define the problem the way we see it, it's mainstreaming on 3 fronts. The first is for the 260 million kids in India and the 1.3 billion kids globally who are stuck in formal education today. And I say stuck because everybody understands it's a dystopian construct, and yet we're in school, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. We could reform it in multiple chunks, but effectively it's the same formal curriculum. How do you make them taste success, and what set of metrics define what that success looks like? That's the first thing. So how do you mainstream success in the context of formal education today? Embibe has a mantra which says no child left behind, which means that we don't just create for new students who enter our utopian world, but we are very firmly entrenched in the problems of today. The second thing is, how do you mainstream transition of students from formal education into what they actually need to be developing as a skill set? So for example, Mala said something very interesting, that instead of rote learning, actually get into creative problem solving, right? Roger was talking about, let's do it. Mr. Kenny had a bunch of other opinions. But the point is, all of these are hacks at a problem where there needs to be a continuum of a transition from rote learning onto interactive, onto synthesis, onto evaluation, which is what we call the standard Bloom's taxonomy, which means you can't just deep dive into, judging the outcome or what would have happened to the history of the United States if the Confederates had won. You first need to know what was the American Civil War, right? So there is a transition, and the formal texts of today don't afford an ability for you to transition from status quo X to Y simply because there is just not enough content for higher order thinking available in the textbooks of today, as I will empirically prove to you during the course of my talk. And as part of that, the actual transition that you need to mainstream is not just to get the guy to tell you that what would have happened if the Confederates won. You want that person to be a strong problem solver, which is a 21st century skill. Everybody has their own way to encapsulate it. I believe that there are 5 essential 21st century skills, that are required for a person to be successful. The first is to be a problem solver. And, in that context, this is not about really sort of learning math or, getting machine learning algorithm aptitude or, becoming sort of Steve Jobs at the age of 7, right? This is just about knowing, how do you ask questions from data? How do you look at large data sets? How do you even get down solving a small problem or a big problem as a human being? The second is to be a coder. Why? Because you want to speak the language of machines. It's just an essential skill. It's like speaking in English. A large part of the communication that you have will happen with machines. It will not happen with other human beings as you evolve and you move forward in the 21st century. The third is to be a leader or an empath, because emotional skills, and emotive skills and relating skills and communication skills are all sort of skills which are required for us to be successful. Again, skills which are not going to be very successfully emulated through machines, and so on and so forth. A couple of others like, be an orator, which is just communicating great, like synthesizing the data and then giving the outcomes in a way which makes a lot of human sense and that makes the data relatable, is another 21st century skill. So the second is, how do you mainstream the transition from current education to the skills that we need to acquire, and how are you going to fuel that transition? And the third mainstreaming problem is, how do you make the access to this beautiful tool that we're trying to create inclusive and available for everybody at the right price and at the right language and with the right device? Because, for example, in India, 260 million kids, 55% are vernacular. And if you look at the best texts written in the market, they're all in English. So who's going to own the burden of building this dirty foundation, and really getting in and creating that thing that allows us to build what we need to build? So when we take a step back from the problems, which is the 3 problems of mainstreaming: number 1, success in current education; number 2, transition from the current system to where we want these students to be; and the third, inclusive, it actually calls for the need of a horizontal platform that cuts across context in education and focuses around learner centricity. Which is very simply put, I grew up and went across multiple grades, went to university, and I'm sitting here right now, and it's one person. So I evolve in my knowledge, I evolve in my social and emotional learning, and then I consume different types of content. And I was challenged on that content, depending on its availability and its delivery to me by certain expert teachers I encountered around the way. So if I were to build a system that does 3 things: 1, builds extreme capability to understand me as a person, which means understand me behaviorally and understand content in a contextual way, whether you're a K-12 learner, whether you are a learner that is just trying to acquire a skill, if you're a learner who's basically trying to prepare for an entrance exam, so that the learner can come and improve independently, or a teacher can actually use our AI algorithms to package content specific to each child in the classroom, or the teacher can use our algorithms to, at the press of a button, help every child go on their personalized achievement journey. I would be amiss, if I don't end with the impact of our platform. So I'm very happy to report that working along with Geo and the vernacular engines that we're building, we have been able to do things from taking a very lowbrow set of schools, when I say lowbrow, I mean SECC, because they don't have much access, and elevating levels in multiplication from 40% to 90% in terms of pure concept mastery in a 20-hour flat exposure, to getting girls from tribal Rajasthan. I'm saying, girl education, because Larry, you were so passionate about it as well, to actually clear engineering entrance exams at the J level, even when they did not even know about the exam. And once again, in a 20 to 30 hour time frame, being able to improve individual competency in a topic as complex as atomic structure, and then have that system run in a government classroom for an entire year and achieve success in the mainstream exam. And then finally, the way we go to market is on 3 fronts. One, a student can come and log in and improve on their own for the context that they choose. Or a private institution can come and choose their context, set up their course, and the teacher can auto-personalize the delivery of content and feedback in their classroom. And then finally, a government can use our enterprise solutions like the National Testing Agency did to solve for whatever their use cases. In the NTS case, it was, I want a testing app where you can deliver me 2 tests a day at a very high level of quality, machine learning generated tests, over 1 billion attempts made and turned around in 2 days flat during COVID. So this is basically, a small flavor into what we are trying to do as a platform. Of course, we have a demo later, so I wouldn't want to spend much more time. But this is a bit about us.
Thank you, Aditi. But coming back to what you're doing and going back to some of the comments made by Roger, and I'm going to do the second round of questionings in the reverse order. So it'll be first Aditi, then Larry, and then you, Mala. So I'll just do that order. But given the fact that the comments that were made earlier, that the current education system is one teacher teaching at the same pace to a group of students with an objective of actually passing the exam, and and I think no one is saying that. There was also the comment that no one is questioning why you need to pass that exam. Are you doing more of the same, in this, and actually using artificial intelligence and machine learning and algorithms to beat the system, or you're actually doing something else? You're creating an opportunity for kids to to actually interact more, to learn what they're passionate about, etc. And and how could the kids who are listening into this, the young people who are listening into this, actually benefit from this?
So I think it's a very good question. And I feel like there are 2 ways to answer this. The first is, what algorithms do we use to calibrate learner outcomes, which is straightforward, right? So the first is a zero-sum game, Dilip, just the way you sort of, figured it out, which is test prep. There is a pattern. Can you beat the system? So I would also want to tell you that even the JEE Advanced exam, for example, has a pattern. Everybody says IIT entrance, is amazing, but there is something called human bias, right? And everybody thinks difficult is the same idea, interestingly, right? So even IITians, in a sense, are cookie cutter if you really go into the data deep and understand how, the content looks. So the first algorithm is actually Embibe's score quotient, which is 40% behavioral parameters related and 60% knowledge parameters related, which is definitely a zero-sum game, but it helps you hack or beat the system on an exam. And we've been so good at it. We've actually had kids, who sort of got into the JEE mains, but were barely able to scrape through their 12th grade. So this is like how effectively you can actually do pattern recognition on an exam context. The point is, it's not worth anybody's time to really start to spend time preparing for an exam, which is a once-in-a-lifetime event. But that was the first and starting point. The second tier is concept mastery, which is where you actually get into the depth of learning of a concept and how deep you've gone. So the knowledge graph of Embibe actually connects learning for a user right from grade 1. And we're trying to go into faculty development and skill development pre-grade 1 as well, all the way to the last exam you'll ever take, or lifelong learning. So my life's mission is to build and populate this knowledge graph. It's a 3-dimensional graph where you can literally see how concepts are interconnected, which is basically how the brain is wired to layer concepts and they're learning one on top of the other. So there is an empirical way to calibrate your mastery on a concept basis how you engage with items related to that concept. So if you have enough items as in questions, right, which start from rote and go up to Bloom's higher order thinking, you can actually see the user progress through the concept mastery and calibrate that, which is a lifelong learning or a learning-based goal. The third level is looking at it as an orthogonal axis, which is skill mastery. So you could actually be amazing at 100 concepts, but those 100 concepts could be biased towards abstract thinking, or they could be biased towards quantitative ability, right? Which actually then lends itself to the 21st century skills. And there are multiple ways to look at the data. So that's the first part. The second part, really quickly, is I think a challenge to EdTech as a whole. We've got to stop looking at EdTech as a segmented entity where learner data is created and destroyed year on year on year by thinking of it as K-12, pre-undergrad, and post-grad, blah, 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 grad school, and segmenting it like that. It has to be segmented around the learner's journey, which is uniform. So the way I would like to invite the world to look at EdTech is in 3 different tiers. The first tier is transactional systems, which are providing you different tools. Come and create something. Solve a question, watch a video, but it's a transaction and there is a quantum of data generated with each transaction. Which brings me to the second level, which is personalized adaptive learning systems, where the transaction and the feedback from that transaction start to make a lot of sense. And the stateful nature of multiple transactions in a sequence matters to the person observing it and calibrating their algorithms to become more and more effective. PAL systems are only as good as the amount of data they collect and the depth of tagging on the content, as well as how far back they can go. And then the third level, which is the final level, at least so far as to what I can see, is if you have collected enough data, you really start to understand which feedback loops are the most powerful. And that's when you become a learning outcomes company. And I'm happy to say that 8 years of perseverance, dodging investors and dodgy business models, we've got to a place where we've become a learning outcomes company.
So thanks, Aditi, for that. And Larry, if I can come to you, and one of the challenges is that how do you handle multiple countries in Asia, multiple languages, multiple learning systems, how do we actually look at, EdTech or artificial intelligence in actually shaping the young minds across different cultures, different systems? Is there something which is, I just want to go back to Schank's whole thing about the PISA test, right? Which is, kind of a different way of evaluating it. But is there something in which we need to collaborate, do things together? And what is the opportunity for young kids to actually do this going forward?
I was just about to say I'm on mute. I think if we did a word cloud for the most used phrases this year, I think with all the virtual learning and experiences we've had on Zoom or Teams or other platforms like this, I think the biggest words on the word cloud are going to be "you're on mute." But in all seriousness, I do believe that technologies like this make a difference, and you're right. I mean, it's frankly. I've been in the educational technology business for 31 years. One thing that doesn't come out in my LinkedIn profile, which we referenced earlier, is that my first 10 years in education technology, I actually worked in a family business with my mother. I come from a family of educators. My grandparents were teachers. My mother was a teacher and a principal and a superintendent. And my sister actually was a teacher and retired. I've never taught other than accounting TA at Cornell, where I got my master's, but I come from this genetic predisposition, if you will, towards education. And I learned a great deal in those early years, 89 through 99, around how technology can have an impact on students and have an impact on learning through the eyes of my mother and the experience of the other educator who co-founded the business that I helped to run and own at the time. And it's astounding how over the 3 decades or so that I've been in the business, how we've gone through these waves of quote unquote paradigm shifts that were going to change the way we teach and change the way students learn, et cetera. And it hasn't really changed all that much when you get right down to it in the 30 years or so that I've been in it, and probably is the case for even longer. But I dare say that what COVID-19's brought to us, and I dare say as well, that with the incredible proliferation and speed and rate at which things like internet connectivity and access to information and technology and what AI and machine learning can bring to that as well, has accelerated things far beyond I think anyone could have imagined. We've seen years of acceleration and just months of activity, as a result of all the massive move to distance learning, remote learning, driven by the COVID-19 situation, which I think is really promising, really, really exciting in many ways. I think schools, dealt with in some ways better than others, maybe as we've gone through it. But I think where AI and where technology and communication platforms like this create opportunities to bridge cultures, bridge languages, bridge the way in which we learn, help create and drive personalized learning in the way Tita described opportunities is super exciting. And I kind of think about this. I often share it as an example. My first experience with technology was actually when I was a sophomore in high school. I went to a very small high school in Portola Valley near Stanford University, and it was a boarding school. A classmate of mine somehow knew how to sneak into the Stanford Computer Center. And we used to go in the weekends and play Star Trek on the Stanford systems, which I think ultimately became Sun Microsystems platforms, which was ironic given I worked at Sun Microsystems for 8 years as well before I joined Microsoft. But my point was that playing Star Trek 40 years ago, you'd plug in your coordinates, you'd wait 20 minutes, you'd get a printout, and you'd see how your ship moved, you'd make a new move, and then wait 20 minutes, get another printout, you'd see a Klingon ship appear, you'd figure out your strategic move, et cetera, et cetera. The amount of time and passion that went into that was pretty extraordinary. Now today, when you look at the way if you look at the way mixed reality, things like Minecraft, which Susie's about to demonstrate, create opportunities for students to learn in such a rapid and more exciting and fast-paced place and way. Add to that the potential of mixed reality like HoloLens and other experiences like that with AI serving up learning experiences to students as they progress at their pace and in modalities that make a difference for their learning is incredibly exciting. So I think the platforms are coming together faster than ever before, and I only wish I could live another 40, 50 years to see where it'll take students in the future.
Thank you, Larry, and I'll come to you, Mala. Mala, if you look at this whole discussion that we're having, the two things which actually stand out. One, the young are going to learn and be in a learning ecosystem that is significantly going to be different from the past, and they need new tools and new abilities to actually master the future. And the third thing, which is actually not come in here, that there might be a time where 3 generations of even 4 generations of people will be in the same education institution or same learning experience as going forward. So in your view, and just to be very provocative and just say that dissection in some countries has been banned for biology, right? Okay, you can't do dissection. There's going to be a shortage of cadavers for medical education. There might become a time where chemical experiments and others may be banned because of climate change issues, because of the heat generated in reactions. How do you think, and what are the opportunities for young people to develop solutions for these kind of problems using artificial intelligence, using machine learning, and using creativity, products and systems from across the world?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Dilip. I think there's a couple of things that came up in today's conversation that have me super excited. I think the first point that Ms. Jyoti Arora made about in the next 1,000 days, the intention of the government of India is to have every house internet connected. That was a really thrilling stat that you shared, because having spent time in India in these schools, what has been really heart-wrenching for me is that every student, when you put technology into their hands, they will surprise you with what they will create. Their imagination is so prolific, more than, I see young Susie here with us now on the call. Most of us, we get stuck in sort of, rails of things to do, right? But students are so prolific. And the one thing they do not have is technology in their hands. I'm super excited. I think the urgency, and Aditi made this point about, 250 million kids in India in K-12. India is going to have the future workforce for the world here. So the urgency of enabling these students to help them learn, to help them express themselves, to help them create, in my mind, is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. And I'll share a quick example, Dilip, and then I'll answer your question in that context. I have a nephew, like every little boy who's 10 years old, he loves to game. Okay, and he's in the US and he loves Fortnite, similar to PUBG in India. Because I work at Adobe, I was able to put some tools into his hands. Within moments, this young boy wants to be a YouTube star. He wants to create skins for his Fortnite characters. without me spending any time with him. He figured it out. He went to YouTube, he learned everything. So we imagine, Dilip, that these kids are not capable. They're absolutely capable. They grew up with photos and videos. Most of us on this call grew up with writing and paper. That is not their reality. Their reality is movement. Their reality is responsive experiences. And I believe that it is our responsibility to enable that. Now, coming to your question about learning, whether it's sciences or, doing, dissections, whatever the case might be. Well, again, in the context of my world of creativity, right? We can enable creators, students, to create those experiences. We provide them those tools. There are tools that allow you to create an augmented reality experiences. We have, tools that allow you to create 3D experiences for photo. So there's artificial photography that gets done today. You don't have to go into the field and photograph anymore. You can use 3D models and apply texturing. So the tools are there, Dilip. What the students, how they want to learn is, I think, well understood by them. They learn through creating. And I think the job for all the tech companies, all the leaders on this call is to enable that.
Thank you, Mala, for that. I'm just reminded that I've run actually a little bit over the panel discussion time. So I'm not going to go into the last round of this thing, but just going to end there by saying that whether it's an Indian company based in India, which Aditi is talking about, or global companies, which Mala and Larry actually represent, there is an opportunity for the young minds and to actually take the education tools available and use them to enable them to actually learn how to live. I'm just taking Shank's points there, and actually be meaningful in life going forward. All the young people who are actually listening in, for you, it's a great opportunity to use, to understand these different tools that people are creating. Not only to use them, but use these tools to create your own tools, like everyone actually explained, so that you can add, a lot of bring about a lot of social equity as you go forward. So thank you all the panelists for being there, and apologies, Susie and Aditi, for eating into your time. I would like to hand over back to Ms. Jyoti Arora for the next session. So thank you, Larry, thank you, Mala, and thank you, Aditi.
Take care.
Jyoti, can I make a cheeky comment, like a very quick one, 5 seconds? So Dilipji, there is an app called Froggypedia, okay, where you can go and dissect a frog if you want right now for your pleasure, which was actually a PETA awarded app created by Embibe, a company that we acquired recently, which actually saved the lives of frogs all over the world.
That's
so
awesome.
there are more frogs to kiss for those who are interested.
That is a fascinating note to end. It was a fantastic panel discussion, looking at immense possibilities in the field of educating our youth, creating frameworks, and equitable growth for everyone through the use of AI. Thank you, Dilip, for that wonderful session, and all the panelists. I think the youth and the listeners must be there are a lot of questions, but I think we are short of time. So I would leave the questions and maybe post those questions to you for answering them directly. So we are coming now to the last part of the session, that is the demos. We start with Susie Tinker. She has been waiting for a very long time. Thank you, Susie, for being there for such a long time. She holds a bachelor degree from Michael G. Foster School of Business, University of Washington. Susie joined Microsoft in 2018 and is Customer and Partner Engagement Manager, Minecraft Education, helping educators bring Minecraft Education edition to their classrooms to encourage student engagement, STEM learning, and 21st century skills. So over to you, Susie. Please start with your demo.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to share more about Minecraft education with you all and hopefully inspire you that Minecraft just isn't a tool to drive STEM learning and coding skills, but also things like engagement, social emotional learning, 21st century skills, digital citizenship, and so much more. So our mission at Minecraft is to build a better world through the power of play. Minecraft was actually just announced as the #1 best-selling game of all time, overcoming Tetris, if you can believe that. And if you were to guess the average age of a Minecraft player, a lot of people guess 8, 9, 10 years old. It's actually 24 years old, if you can believe that. There are so many people around the world who love Minecraft. And before I get into my quick demo, I'd love to share a short story about a 9th grade biology student from Texas. So this student was in biology class and his teacher had recently gone through a Minecraft training to learn how to use Minecraft education as a learning tool in the classroom. And this student at the time had 13 missing assignments and had never passed a quiz or a test. When this teacher came back from the Minecraft training, she did a lesson in her biology class where the students would be building DNA molecules with Minecraft. And this student, for the first time, engaged with his peers, taught others how to use the software, and actually completed his first fully complete lab worksheet. So when we're able to help meet students where they are and engage them in material through platforms that they know and love like Minecraft, we're able to help engage them in content and material in a ways that a piece of paper simply cannot do. So I'm going to go through 2 short demos today. The first one is going to be showcasing our in-game coding platform, which is Code Builder, and introduce you to our agent, which is our in-game coding robot buddy. And then I will end with showing our Hour of Code lesson from last year, which Anthony talked about, which is AI for Good. So this first lesson example is a classic history lesson that a teacher in Wales did. He always had his students go to a field trip to the local castle in their community. They would learn about what times were like in some century there and turn in a classic history report. But when this teacher started using Minecraft, that lesson totally changed into a cross-curricular lesson that now involved math and collaboration and coding. So the one thing the teacher told them that they were going to be doing is replicating this castle on a 1-to-1 scale in Minecraft, and they had to use code in some way to build some part of their castle. So the students did some pre-work. As any good Minecraft lesson requires, they learned what the castle was made of, who lived there, what activities happened at some certain century. And then when they went on their field trip, this is the actual dimensions that the student took on the field trip that the teacher had sent to me that they used to then recreate their castle in Minecraft. And now what you're seeing is our in-game coding platform called Code Builder. Minecraft education supports Microsoft MakeCode, Tinker, Python, and JavaScript. And so what you're seeing on the screen right now is Code Builder with Microsoft MakeCode, and you can actually toggle back and forth between JavaScript and Python to go back and forth between blocks and text-based coding. And so what some students figured out was they could use the agent, which you'll see here in a second, to build the most time-consuming, repetitive piece of the castle, which was the castle walls. They're huge, they're ginormous. It could take the students all day to build them. So with some simple code, these students can have their agent build the castle walls for them while they collaborate and figure out who's going to build the more intricate inside pieces of the castle. So we'll see what this looks like. So all you have to do to launch Code Builder in Minecraft is push C on your keyboard, and then we can actually execute this code with chat commands. So you'll see here, this is my agent. Our agent can execute and build for us with code that we write for it. So we can give our agent some building materials, in this case, cobblestone. That's what the castle was built out of. And with a chat command, which we wrote as castle in Code Builder, we can have the agent execute that code that we wrote. So now you can see, we can watch it go build all of the castle walls just with a few simple lines of block-based code. We could watch it build all day. We don't have time for that, unfortunately, but it will just keep going and building and building. And now to demonstrate what was actually going on in the inside of the castle while the agent continues to build. This is what a collaborative Minecraft build looks like. There are 3 students in this build. Someone's spawning farm animals, someone's decorating the castle walls with banners, and someone's even building a well as a water source. So this is what a collaborative cross-curricular lesson in Minecraft can look like. A really great example of a classic history lesson that just used to be a history report turned cross-curricular lesson with math, collaboration, coding, and so much more. And to go back to our hour of code lesson that has been mentioned a couple of times today, last year was the first year that we participated in Hour of Code with an actual in-game lesson in Minecraft versus being on the code.org website. There have been over 150 million Minecraft Hour of Code sessions completed in the last few years. So last year's Hour of Code lesson was all around AI for good, and we actually teach our agent, which we've introduced as our coding robot buddy helper friend, to detect forest fires and elements that would contribute to a forest fire and actually get rid of those elements, which I'll show you. Anyone can go and download Minecraft and play through this lesson. You can go to our website, which is education.minecraft.net, go download the client and try this demo lesson, no matter who you are or where you live. So just to go through this lesson, the first couple of parts, this is a guided lesson. It's great for students who want to do Hour of Code by themselves at home. And this is an NPC or non-player character, and they guide us through the entire lesson. So we're going to start the lesson by opening the gate. We pushed C on our keyboard. And what's great about our Hour of Code tutorials is that they're guided step by step. You're only given the blocks that are required to complete the activity. So it wants us to open gate. And there are, I believe, 10 activities in this Hour of Code session, and each one gets progressively more difficult, as you'll see throughout this presentation. So now we meet our agent, and we are going to code our agent to move forward 3 steps. So we'll go into Code Builder. All of the directions are listed at the top of the screen, and I'm going to have my agent move forward by 3. And then the next activity is unlocked. And then the final thing we're going to learn in activity 3 here is agent analyze. So we are starting to teach our agent about dry brush that would influence and help contribute to forest fires. So by having the agent analyze this dry brush, we are teaching it that we are eventually going to want to get rid of all of this dry brush to prevent forest fires. So we're going to have our agent move forward, and at the end, when he's standing in front of the dry brush, we are going to analyze it. Now we're going to skip over a few activities because it just keeps going and going. But this one actually introduces more of analyzing tools. So we are here teaching our agent what kind of elements prevent forest fires and contribute to forest fires. So when the image pops up on the screen, when they're green and healthy, we're pushing the no button because they do not contribute to forest fires. And then when it's dry, we push the yes button. So all of this information is going into our agent. And then finally, every time a piece of dry brush is in front of our agent, we are going to have it destroy it. So I'll open up Code Builder, follow the instructions at the top of the screen, and figure out what code I need to have the agent eliminate all hazards in front of it. So this code says, while hazards remain, if the agent detects dry brush, we're going to have it destroy it in front of it. It's pretty cute. And then finally, after we have taught our agent all of this information, we get to the final activity, which you'll see from my coding is the most difficult because I actually have to go back and debug my code. So in this activity, we're going to look at a bunch of materials that are in front of us, and we're going to have the agent clear the line of dry brush in front of it to remove the fire. So I see that there's some dry elements in front of the agent. There's some normal green grass and flowers, and I need to code my agent that every time it moves forward and that there's a piece of dry brush in front of it, it's going to destroy. But if there's something not dry, he's actually going to surpass that and just move forward. So every time the agent detects dry brush, where he's going to destroy and move forward one. I'm going to go try that out and see how that works. And you'll actually see the code I wrote did not work. My agent did not move forward in front of the green elements. So I'm going to go back, debug my code, and try again. So I reset the code, and I'm going to start over from scratch. So I learned that I need to have my move button outside of the if statement. And then we will see here that our agent successfully clears all of the dry brush with the code that I wrote. And then the final part of the lesson, lightning does strike and a small fire emerges, but because we cleared most of the dry brush, the fire does not extend into the city, into the village. Congratulations, you completed the hour of code. You can talk to the firefighter for a bonus activity. And then what we actually ended this lesson with is having the students replant and restore the area with flowers and animals and whatever they would like to do. So that is Minecraft Education and our Hour of Code AI for Good lesson. Please feel free to go and download the client and try it yourselves. It is available for everyone in the world today. And thank you so much for having me. And I hope you all learned a little bit more about Minecraft education.
Thank you, Susie. That was very insightful. I think must have excited many parents and many students, even young, not small kids, but young students also to try this. So thank you very much for giving this demo to our viewers. So now the last but not the least is our demo by Aditi. Aditi, I think Dilip has already given your CV, and the only thing I have to add is that you are an alumnus of Booth School and our very own Thapar College of Engineering. So you combine the business and the engineering in you, and that is very evident from your presentation. So let's quickly move to what you have to present.
Thank you so much. So just a couple of comments. I have a video, so that'll be very, and it's called voiceover. So, I just wanted to make a couple of comments before I started. First of all, Susie, that was phenomenal, and what I think is, how do you take Minecraft education and you tag different modules and games purpose-built within Minecraft education to the knowledge graph of Embibe, such that you're able to convert a higher order thinking question from a mundane text-based question to a Minecraft mission. So I think, Larry, we already talked about connecting, so I'm looking forward to that. It's an AI platform, so therefore a lot of collaboration is possible. The other comment I wanted to make is the product that you're about to see is going to be available in 11 languages and across devices at a very accessible and affordable price. The product is coming out very soon. So I don't cover that in the demo. And the third and final thing that I wanted to mention is that we're already working on zero electricity pilots in Ladakh, on this product as well. So I had mentioned something in my last session, which was mainstreaming inclusive access, which I didn't talk much about. And I think this mainstreaming inclusive access is where, our parent company Geo plays a huge role, where we're doing experiments around getting low-cost devices and connectivities bundled in with the personalization experience, and not just sort of pumping and dumping a simple transactional platform to areas that don't have access today. So with that, I want to sort of just share my screen, and I'm going to stop my video so there is no lag, and just play a short video for you guys. So just going to minimize this. Great. So I'm just going to play it. Welcome to Embibe, the AI platform to create learning outcomes for the world. It's a product built with love. It's very, very important for us that all features which are relevant to education, learning, practicing, and testing are built to excruciatingly vivid detail with amazing interactive, engaging content that allows the student to maximize time spent on the platform as well as derive insane utility from the platform, and also allow us to collect data from deeper engagement. We have taken care to ensure that the curriculum is actually aligned to what is actually being studied in class, and takes it one step further, where every activity becomes interactive and guided using artificial intelligence assistance at every single step. The data that we collect calibrates the students' concept mastery as well as their Embibe score quotient, which gives us a sense of quality of learning as well as ability to prepare and appear on a test with great effectiveness as simultaneous variables. We support a bunch of test formats, and we've even worked with the National Testing Agency as one of our customers to deliver highly precise, calibrated tests with deep student feedback. The Embibe platform has been created at the intersection of academic knowledge, data science, and behavioral science. And it's very important to inform all three of these disciplines with actual data collection. Embibe as a company was committed itself 7 years ago to open data collection by building a MOOC through which we have harvested a ton of data, and we have actually built finite state models to make sense of that data and delivered over billions of interventions and 500 million hours of total student engagement on the platform. All the content is further tagged to our knowledge graph, which is a national education policy ready rendition of content, which has converted the calibration of content into a gradeless experience. Sequencing learning is an experienced teacher problem. Using this knowledge graph as the intelligent backend of your in-classroom delivery or a student's consumption of learning on their own, the journey of what to study next becomes a solved problem at a very personalized level. Informing this knowledge graph and populating it with content is a very costly problem if you want to do it across every context for every child in the world. It was important for us to solve the content ingestion and the content generation problem to decrease the unit cost of content created. One thing to do is to solve questions on our own. The other is to engage and invite teachers and educators and bring their intellectual property onto the platform and give them an ability to leverage our tags for personalizing their content and their intellectual property collected over many, many years for their own students. Smart tagging helps them digitize the content as well as classify it. Another important problem is discerning the quality of content and also ensuring that learning becomes a sensor thinking problem. It's easy to understand the quality of a question once it's taken live. It's hard to understand the quality of a learning experience because more often than not, it is measured simply as pause and play, quite simply like a Netflix video. But how can the discernment of the effectiveness of a learning experience be similar to the discernment of the effectiveness of the engagement of a movie which is built for purely commercial or pleasure purposes? We've ensured that learning experiences are calibrated and available frame by frame, where we can go in and see the effectiveness of learning as well as engagement on a per frame level through a new technology that we are debuting very soon called Kubos, which enable us to look at every single object which has been used to create the Kubo as a distinct object tagged to some or the other node in the knowledge graph. Qualitative and quantitative feedback comes together and allows academicians to further refine this content. We would be very amiss if we don't think about Bharat when we build for India. This product is going to be available in 11 languages very soon. We have partnered with Reverie, which is an exciting AI platform for language translation, as well as built our own machine learning algorithms for language translation for all of the content, textual as well as video. Bringing this together for teachers is another very exciting application, which is content packaging, because you can create individual content elements, but then how do you create a great quality standardized test, which is what we did for the National Testing Agency, or how do you create simply a fantastic quality of personalized homework, or indeed just take a book, ingest it, and be able to understand the new concepts introduced by section, understand the concepts prevalent in the book, figure out summarization of those concepts, and understand what are the distinct academic terms that are being used, or generate questions from that book, or even extract questions line by line from the book, or generate questions from the book and then tag them to their corresponding concepts and difficulty level and so on and so forth. Taking this together with all this content, with the knowledge graph and all the data collected, we crunch millions of variables per kid to design a personalized achievement journey for every student. This personalized achievement journey lays emphasis to two specific types of interventions, behavior as well as knowledge. Because it's a very interesting thing that we have seen that 40% of learning outcomes comes from intent to participate and smart test taking. We are very proud to see these personalized achievement journeys deem themselves to be effective through data, have been derived as effective to, in terms of their impact on student learning outcomes. We have seen improvements as high as 40 to 60%, in terms of base sort of outcomes over large cohorts of students from the most unlikeliest of places, and in just 20 hours of engagement. We've built our own customized elastic search for education, which we are also extending to vernacular and voice use cases. We are bringing these products together for enterprise users and government users, as I mentioned before, like the National Test Abhyas. We've experienced 1 billion attempts just this season with this one particular customer that we work with very proudly for the Government of India. There are tons of publications for the work that we've done. We've just been granted one of the world's first patents in empirically demonstrating learning outcomes creation as a model with the, statistically impacting behavior and knowledge. We're now part of the World Economic Forum's Global Innovator Community, the first EdTech startup from India, and also very proudly a RAISE Award winner from yesterday. This has been an exciting journey on behalf of all of Team Embibe. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Aditi. Thank you very much. You were there yesterday when we were kind of showcasing the startups which have done very well in India yesterday, and you have won the prize for that as well. So amazing work being done. With that, we come to the end of the session. Thanks all the speakers for your thoughtful perspectives on the use of AI for shaping young minds. The question still remains whether we will remove biases or create new ones with emerging technologies of AI. For that, we will still have to depend on the intuitive human brain. With that, I thank once again all of you for being part of this event, and also I would like to thank the engaged viewers. Thank you very much. It has been very fascinating. With that, we close the session. Thank you. Jai Hind.